In Washington, D.C., young leaders shed light on issues confronting development in their countries. Henry Chibutu of Zambia begins.
We even claim that, you see, the reason why we're here is because we're cut from a different piece of cloth. You see, a story is told of King Herod of old, that after giving a great oration, the audience said back to him that the voice you've been listening to is not the voice of a man, but a voice of a God. And he was struck with lightning. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a cancer. The problem here is we have this selfish mentality, this self-centeredness. As I began to think about all these things going around in my society, and as I pursued to study my own degree for 5 years, I decided to put my degree aside. Because you see, Africa is plagued with a great cancer. The Democratic Republic of Congo has got an estimated $36 trillion worth of resources in its belly. The president of Cameroon earns 129 times more money than the average civil servant in that country. In my country, Zambia, we're diverting resources and feeding our leaders, enriching them at the expense of what? Employment for the youths. We lack inputs for the farmers. Our factories are closing left, right, center. Our hospitals lack the medical care, medicines that our people need. Now, as we think about all these things, as I sat in the classroom, I saw an obsession with my classmates, not just at my campus, but many other campuses. They had an obsession. They desired three things. You can guess it. They desired money. Number two, more money. Number three, more and more money. What they sought for was to reach the high levels of society, to live in the residential areas and live the good life. I asked myself, who's going to take care of the people in the grassroots? Who's going to help those people that are suffering? You see, it's a cycle. We claim that the people who are rich and influential are not pouring our lives into us, but we do the exact same thing. When we get rich, when we get influential, we take up and sit in our air-conditioned vehicles, pull up our windows, and decide not to greet anyone because we've forgotten where we've come from.
In Kenya, public health facilities lack diverse specialization. A young medical practitioner plans to change that.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Joining us on the program is a clinical pharmacist, Deborah Kenyanya. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you.
It's my understanding that you've really focused your sights on how to best and most efficiently alleviate the pain of Kenyans. Can you talk a little bit about your experience and about what has propelled you into the YALI program?
It started about 3 years ago when a patient was admitted at the hospital I work in, which is a spinal injury hospital. And he had cancer, he had tuberculosis, he had a spinal injury, and he had also HIV. So he was on a whole cocktail of medicines, but he had a lot of pain. And with all the treatment that we could give him, he was still crying out in pain with the highest doses that we could possibly give him. And he just wanted to stay alive long enough to see his child, his first child actually. He was a young man. And sadly, he did pass away, but he did get to see his child, who was born in rather dire conditions because he wasn't from a well-off family. His wife was a stay-at-home woman. And his case more or less propelled me to think about the whole aspect with regards to, yes, he did have the conditions that he had, but would his life or his quality of life be better made if he was able to be taken care of by specialized personnel? With his particular case, we had to run around headless chicken, not so much, but with the aspect of where would we get the people to be able to help him out? Because we had the physicians in the hospital, but specializing in pain is not a thing that is looked at as a basic thing when we have to grapple with many other issues like tuberculosis or HIV or malaria. So with all that, I thought that why not try and get a few people to come together to be able to set up a pain institute. to some extent, it may be seen as a far-fetched idea because the public health system still is dealing with the infectious diseases, but non-infectious diseases are rising in our country, and the double burden of disease is actually really high. So with the two put into play, and all of them still having a basis of pain, so why not have an institute? So I did talk to a few people, and they thought that, yes, it can happen. So I figured, why not try and learn how to actually make this happen? Because if you do not learn how it's done, then more or less you will probably fumble around and fail at the end of it.
Some of these challenges, you've mentioned this micro example, but when you look at it from the macro perspective, I'm aware of the fact that you studied the policy side of this. And I want to ask you a little bit about that, because at the level of administration, what changes do you think can be made to ensure that not only would you have, pain institutes in public health facilities, but also that this can be something that would kind of change the orientation of Kenyans at all levels of society concerning this issue? You
have to start it with the education aspect. And it's a good thing that someone thought about it before I did, because just after graduating at my School of Pharmacy, undergraduate, the study of pain actually started 3 years after I graduated, which means that someone actually thought about it from the policy aspect, from education. And then after this, there is a department within the Ministry of Health that looks at specialized clinical services. And I did approach them with the idea with regards to a pain clinic and pain management within the centers. And yes, they are open to the idea. The only problem with regards to all this is always who will fund it, and how will we be able to sustain it within the public healthcare system. And I am actually grateful that YALI gave us an opportunity, because at the university I was at, the Ohio State University, we learned how to do policy analytics and simulations, which is knowledge that I will actually use back home to be able to sell the idea to the Ministry of Health and collaborators. And within the YALI network, I've met with 2 or 3 partners who are also fellows who work within the sector and are able to give me contacts with pharmaceutical companies that may actually be interested in investing in the whole idea of a pain management center and clinic. So yes, it's a long time coming, yes, but I do believe that with the networks that have been formed and the fact that there are receptive people within the Ministry of Health, it will work. Administratively, it will work with the policy analytics and having it passed as a requirement within the Ministry of Health that all public hospitals have to have pain centers. Then this can work to be able to mesh up the integration of what we do with preventive healthcare and also the pain.
You touched a bit on networking and the potentials for that within the YALI framework. Mm-hmm. And I want to ask you about your association with, or potential association with, multilateral institutions that could be interested in funding this kind of really noble initiative. Have you seen interest from the private sector or from the non-government sector as it relates to the work you're doing?
Yes, I have. One of the fellows from Niger was actually kind enough to have a discussion with me with regards to this, because I did happen to mention the Pain Institute, and she was of the idea that there are pharmaceutical companies out there that do a lot of research in pain management, and using this as a platform base, and with regards to government laws and how the private-public partnership can actually be run, and the fact that our country has actually laws in place with regards to public-private partnership, then using that as a platform with the pharmaceutical companies, I do believe that collaborative efforts can work. May not happen within a year, but I do believe 5 to 10 years we'll be talking about a really well-established state-of-the-art pain management institute in Kenya, in a public hospital.
Well, I wish you the best with that.
Thank you.
These outstanding young leaders hold in common an unwillingness to settle with one particular solution by thinking outside of the box and constantly probing and questioning what more is possible and how they can innovate and create solutions to alleviate the personal and developmental challenges of the communities they serve. Next week on the program, we introduce you to a young man who is leading a new charge in the Nigerian public sector as a senior bureaucrat at a very young age. You do not want to miss his story of determination and groundbreaking work. My name is Ajuri Ngelale. Until next time, lead where you are, and followers will find you.